Hi, Teresa here from parentingforsocialchange.com. Thanks for joining me today to talk about trust. I have a couple of new articles posted about trust and rethinking trust that are available below. You'll see links to them in the description. I've been thinking about it in the context of our broader culture. I do have an earlier video about whether or not you can trust children if you don't trust yourself. In this context, I want to think about trust as a reflection of some of the dysfunctions that we see in our broader culture and how our families are reflections of that. You know, so much of our structures and systems and institutions in our culture are built around mistrust and fear and control. And we grow up within those systems and institutions and family structures as well that mirror mistrust, fear, and control. So we grow up believing that all of those things are normal. And all of those things are really embedded in our thinking, in the ways in which we see the world, in the ways in which we create our relationships, in the ways in which we behave and respond or react to the things around us. So we think mistrust, we think not trusting others is really what's normal and natural. And yet, let's look at babies when they're born and young children before they go through this socialization process. They're so open and trusting. You can see that. And sometimes I think about that trust, of course, certainly is about needing to survive and depend on the adults around them to take care of them and needing them for their survival. But we're born and we come into this world open and trusting. And then what our culture tells us to do is that we have to prepare children for the quote-unquote real world, right? And the real world is something that to be afraid of. It's something that we have to try to control and control our own actions, control the actions of people around us because we live in fear and we don't trust others. We don't trust that others will care and be compassionate. And we believe if we don't train children to live in this world of fear and competitiveness and mistrust, that somehow they will be taken advantage of. And what we get confused about in this process, because we so want to be responsible parents, we want to be parents who do the right things for the children in our lives, what we forget is that in training them for that real world, we're really just creating that world. We're creating those beliefs within children. We're creating that world within ourselves. We're creating that world externally because it reflects how we interact with the world, what we believe about the world. And so if we believe that the world is full of mistrust and we need to be fearful of it and we need to control those around us in order to be safe, that is the world that we create, and that's the world that we train children to create as well. There's this phrase that I often hear in mainstream or dominant parenting, and who knows, I may have said it myself, or thought it, I've certainly thought it, I know I've thought this, where this thing goes through my mind, and I say to myself, I trust that the child in my life is going to make the right decision. And when I challenge myself to think about that phrase and think about how I use the word trust and how we hear that word trust being used in that way and in our culture by others as well, it's really not about trust, is it? It's really about not trusting the other person, the child, to make the right decision. Because the right decision, often when we think about that in that context, when we're in that place of wanting to trust that the child's going to make the right decision, is we want it to be the right decision that we would make, that we want them to make for us, that we think is the right decision for them. It's not about truly trusting the child and the process and the journey that they're on. And we do this often out of love. We think that we have to do this in order to prepare children, in order to do the right thing as parents. And yet, that's not what true trust is. True trust is trusting that the decisions that on the surface may look like mistakes, that on the surface may be quote-unquote wrong, or things that may be failures in a child's life, in our own life, really are just part of the journey that we're on, that lead us to other things, that lead us to maybe greater understanding of who we are and what we want in the world. And so trust isn't about having the child make decisions that are most comfortable for us, the right decisions, right? It's about being with the child as they make those decisions, as they are on their journey, and being beside them and trusting that we don't necessarily know what the future holds for them. And we can't control for that future. So we can trust in the process of life, and we can trust in the learning process of that child. We can trust in our own learning process. And as we do that, we do create a different world. We begin to see the world from a different perspective. I know in my own journey, as I began to open myself up, as I began to trust people more and more, then I found more trustworthy people. Because I wasn't coming to people from this place of mistrust and fear and control. I was coming more from this place of being willing to be open. And so then they approached me in that same way. It's this really amazing experience to have, and that's the experience we can have with children. And certainly I fall back at times into fear and control, and then I can come back to the place of trusting in the process that the child's in and that I'm in, and knowing that we are moving along this together, and that we create a different world when we're willing to be in a place of trust and respect. Thanks for joining me today. And thank you for your commitment to transforming childhood, parenting, and transforming the world.